The champagne flute exploded in Luciano Varcetti's hand. Glass shards glittered as they fell, catching the amber light of the chandeliers above. Blood dripped from his palm onto the white tablecloth, spreading like a dark flower. But Luciano didn't flinch. His cold grey eyes stayed locked on the man across the table who had just grabbed Evie Rowan's wrist. "Apologize," Luciano said quietly. The man, a hedge fund manager in a $2,000 suit, released Evie immediately. His face went pale. I didn't mean..." "Apologize to her, not to me." Evie stood frozen, tray balanced on her hip, heart hammering against her ribs. She'd worked at the Meridian House for 3 years, survived every type of customer from handsy to hostile. But this was different. This was Luciano Varcetti, the man who'd bought the restaurant 2 weeks ago, the man whose name people whispered with equal parts fear and fascination. "I'm sorry," the hedge fund manager stammered, looking at Evie like she might save him. She wouldn't. "It's fine," Evie said flatly. She didn't owe him grace. She turned to walk away, but Luciano's voice stopped her. "Wait." She turned back slowly. Up close, Luciano was younger than she expected, maybe 35, with sharp cheekbones and black hair swept back from his face. Expensive suit, expensive watch, expensive everything. But it was his eyes that unsettled her. They weren't cruel exactly, just empty. "What's your name?" he asked. "Evie. Evie." He repeated it like he was testing the weight of it. "You work here often?" "6 nights a week." "You weren't scared?" It wasn't a question, but Evie answered anyway. "Should I be?" Something flickered across Luciano's face. Surprise, maybe, or irritation. He leaned back in his chair, still bleeding onto the tablecloth. "Most people are. I'm not most people." The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "No, I can see that." Then he did something Evie didn't expect. He gestured to the manager hovering near the kitchen. "Fire her." Evie's stomach dropped. "What?" "You heard me," Luciano said, still watching her with those empty eyes. "Fire her, tonight." The manager, a nervous man named Paul, rushed over. "Mr. Varcetti, Did I stutter? "No, sir." Paul turned to Evie, his face twisted with regret. "Evie, I'm sorry. You need to clock out." "Are you serious?" Evie's voice cracked, anger flooding her chest. She looked at Luciano. "I didn't do anything wrong." "I know," Luciano said calmly. He picked up a napkin and wrapped it around his bleeding hand. "But you don't belong here." "Because I didn't bow to you? Because you're too honest for a place like this." Evie wanted to throw her tray at him, wanted to scream. But she'd learned a long time ago that rage didn't pay rent. She set the tray down carefully, untied her apron, and dropped it on the table in front of Luciano. "You're a coward," she said quietly. Luciano's jaw tightened. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. You break glasses and fire people because it makes you feel powerful, but you're just scared like everyone else." For a moment, the restaurant went silent. Every eye turned toward them. Luciano stood slowly, towering over her. Evie's pulse spiked, but she didn't step back. "Leave," he said, voice low and dangerous. "Gladly." Evie turned and walked toward the exit, head high, even though her hands were shaking. She didn't look back. She didn't see the way Luciano watched her go, something dark and curious flickering in his gaze. Outside, the cold night air hit her like a slap. Red Bay's harbour district stretched out before her, neon signs reflecting off wet pavement. Evie pulled her jacket tighter and started walking. She had $43 in her bank account. Rent was due in 5 days. and she'd just lost her best-paying job. But she didn't regret what she'd said. Not yet. The next morning, Evie woke to her phone buzzing non-stop. Texts from co-workers, missed calls from friends in the service industry. She scrolled through them with growing dread. Did you piss off Luciano Varcetti? What did you do? You're blacklisted. No one will hire you. Her stomach turned. She opened her email. 3 rejection letters from places she'd applied 2 months ago. All sent within the last hour. All vague. All final. Evie threw her phone across the room. She spent the next 2 days pounding pavement, walking into every restaurant, bar and hotel in Redmar Bay. The answer was always the same. A tight smile. A polite rejection. Sometimes they didn't even let her finish her pitch. By the 3rd day, her savings were gone. By the 4th, she was eating ramen and considering selling her laptop. On the 5th day, someone knocked on her apartment door. Evie opened it to find a man in a black suit, tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar running through his left eyebrow. He looked like he could break her in half without breaking a sweat. "Evie Rowan?" he asked. "Who's asking?" "My name is Marco Taglieri. I work for Luciano Varcetti." He handed her a sleek black envelope. "He'd like to see you." Evie stared at the envelope like it might bite her. "Tell him to go to hell." Marco didn't smile. "He expected you'd say that, which is why he asked me to give you this." He handed her a second envelope, thicker, heavier. Evie opened it. Inside was a cashier's check for $5,000. "What is this?" she whispered. "A retainer," Marco said. "Mr. Varcetti has a job for you. If you're interested, meet him tonight, 8 o'clock, Aurelius Tower, penthouse." "And if I'm not interested?" Marco's expression didn't change. "Then keep the money and keep struggling." Evie stood outside the Aurelius Tower at 7:58, staring up at the gleaming glass structure that pierced the Redmar Bay skyline. She'd cashed the check that afternoon, paid her rent, bought groceries, hated herself a little for it. But she was here. The lobby was all marble and gold, sterile and cold. A security guard escorted her to a private elevator that required a key card. The ride up was silent except for the hum of machinery. When the doors opened, Evie stepped into a penthouse that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, minimalist furniture, a bar stocked with bottles that probably cost more than her car, and Luciano, standing by the window, hands in his pockets. He turned when she entered. "You came. You bribed me. I gave you an option." He gestured to a leather couch. "Sit. I'll stand." Luciano smiled faintly. Still defiant. "Good. What do you want?" He poured himself a drink, whiskey over ice, and took a slow sip before answering. "I want you to find a traitor." Evie blinked. "What?" "Someone in my organization is leaking information, sabotaging shipments, feeding intel to the feds." He set his glass down. "I need someone outside my circle to find out who." "Why me?" "Because you're not afraid of me, because you're observant, and because you have nothing to lose." Evie's jaw tightened. "You made sure of that." "Yes," Luciano said simply. "I did." "You're unbelievable." "I'm pragmatic." He walked closer, stopping just a few feet away. "I'll pay you $25,000. Cash, untraceable. All you have to do is attend a few events, watch, listen, and report back. And if I say no, then you leave, and you keep the $5,000. But we both know you can't afford to say no." Evie hated that he was right. She crossed her arms. "What if I get caught?" "You won't," Marco will train you. Train me to do what? Spy? Train you to survive. There was something in his voice that made Evie pause. Not a threat, a warning. How long? She asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3. And then you disappear. New city, new life, new name if you want it. Luciano's grey eyes locked onto hers. Or you stay and work for me legitimately. Doing what? Whatever you want. Evie laughed bitterly. You really think you can buy anyone? I don't buy people, Evie. I give them choices. He stepped closer. And right now, you don't have many. She wanted to hate him. She did hate him. But she also needed the money, needed a way out of the hole he'd pushed her into. Fine, she said finally. But I have conditions. Luciano raised an eyebrow. Go on. I don't hurt anyone. I don't carry a weapon. And if I find you're a traitor, you let me walk away clean. No strings. Agreed. He extended his hand. Evie stared at it for a long moment before shaking it. His grip was firm, warm, and disturbingly human. Welcome to my world, Luciano said quietly. The next morning, Marco picked Evie up in a black SUV with tinted windows. He drove her to a warehouse on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place that looked abandoned but hummed with hidden activity. Inside, Marco led her to a conference room filled with monitors, maps, and files. Sit, he said. Evie sat. Marco pulled up a chair across from her. Rule number 1. Trust no one. Including you. Especially me. He slid a folder across the table. These are the people you'll be watching. Memorize their faces, their habits, their tells. Evie opened the folder. Inside were photos of men and women in expensive clothes, smiling at galas and charity events. They looked normal, harmless. Who are they? She asked. Luciano's inner circle. Business partners, logistics coordinators, accountants. Marco leaned back. One of them is selling him out. How do you know? Because 3 shipments have been intercepted in the last 2 months. Always at the last minute. Always with perfect intel. Marco's eyes narrowed. Someone's talking. Evie studied the faces. What am I looking for? Anything unusual? Nervous behavior, sudden wealth, secret meetings? He pulled out another file. You'll start at the Solstice Gala next week. Black tie event. You'll go as Luciano's date. Evie's head snapped up. His what? His date. It's the best cover. People will assume you're just another woman he's seeing. They won't suspect you're watching them. And Luciano's okay with this? Marco smirked. It was his idea. Evie's stomach twisted. Great. You'll need to learn how to move in that world, how to talk, how to listen without looking like you're listening. Marco stood. We have 6 days. Let's get started. The training was brutal. Marco drilled her on body language, code words, social hierarchies. He taught her how to spot surveillance, how to remember conversations word for word, how to lie without flinching. By day 3, Evie's head was spinning. By day 5, she could read a room like a map. On day 6, Marco handed her a black dress. Wear this tomorrow night. Evie held it up. It was elegant, expensive, and entirely unlike anything she'd ever worn. You've got to be kidding. You need to look the part. I look like a waitress playing dress-up. No, Marco said seriously. You look like someone who belongs, and that's all that matters. That night, Evie stood in front of her bathroom mirror, trying on the dress. It fit perfectly. Too perfectly. She barely recognized herself. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Tomorrow night, stay close to me, and don't trust anyone. It was from Luciano. Evie stared at the message for a long time before typing back. "I don't trust you either." His response came immediately. "Good." The Solstice Gala was held at the Bellamy Estate, a sprawling mansion on the cliffs overlooking Redmar Bay. Evie arrived in Luciano's car, a sleek black sedan that whispered money and power. She'd been silent the entire drive, watching the city lights blur past the window. Luciano sat beside her, dressed in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. He looked like he belonged in this world, and she felt like an imposter. "Nervous?" he asked. "Should I be?" "Probably." He glanced at her. "But you'll be fine." "How do you know?" "Because you don't break easily." The car stopped in front of the mansion. A valet opened Evie's door, and she stepped out into a world of silk gowns and diamond necklaces. Cameras flashed. People whispered. Luciano appeared beside her, offering his arm. "Stay close," he murmured. Evie took his arm, her pulse racing. They walked up the marble steps together, and for a moment she felt like Cinderella at the ball. Except her prince was a criminal, and the clock wasn't going to save her. Inside, the mansion was a maze of opulence. Crystal chandeliers, gold-trimmed walls, a string quartet playing in the corner. Evie recognized faces from Marco's files. Senators, CEOs, people who smiled with their mouths, but not their eyes. "Remember," Luciano said quietly, leaning close enough that his breath brushed her ear. "Watch, listen, but don't react." "Got it." He guided her through the crowd, stopping to shake hands and exchange pleasantries. Evie stayed at his side, smiling politely, but her eyes were working. She noted who Luciano spoke to, who avoided him, who looked nervous. One woman in particular caught her attention, Seraphine Calder, head of logistics, mid-40s, elegant, with sharp green eyes and a smile that never quite reached them. She stood near the bar, watching Luciano with an intensity that made Evie's skin prickle. "Who's that?" Evie whispered. Luciano followed her gaze. "Seraphine. She's been with me for 8 years. She doesn't look happy to see you." "Seraphine never looks happy." He steered Evie toward the ballroom. "Dance with me." "What?" "It'll give you a better view of the room." Before Evie could protest, Luciano pulled her onto the dance floor. His hands settled on her waist, and she placed hers on his shoulder. They moved in sync with the music, and Evie tried to ignore the way her heart was racing. "You're good at this," she said. "I've had practice." "With how many women?" Luciano's lips twitched. "Does it matter?" "No." But it did, and she hated that it did. As they danced, Evie scanned the room. She saw Seraphine slip out onto a balcony. Alone. Evie's instincts screamed. "I need to use the restroom," she said suddenly. Luciano's eyes narrowed. "What did you see?" "Maybe nothing. Maybe something." He released her. "Be careful." Evie slipped through the crowd, weaving between clusters of guests until she reached the balcony. The door was cracked open. She pressed herself against the wall and listened. Seraphine's voice drifted through the gap. "I told you, not here." A man's voice responded. "We're running out of time. The shipment moves tomorrow night. If we don't act now..." "I said not here." There was a pause, then footsteps. Evie ducked behind a potted plant as Seraphine stepped back inside. The man followed. He was young, maybe late 20s, with slicked back hair and a nervous energy. Evie committed his face to memory. She waited until they were gone before returning to the ballroom. Luciano was waiting near the bar, his expression unreadable. "Well?" he asked. Seraphine was on the phone. Or talking to someone, a man. They mentioned a shipment. Luciano's jaw tightened. What man? I don't know, but I can find out. Before Luciano could respond, the lights flickered, then went out completely. The ballroom plunged into darkness, screams erupted, someone shouted, and then the unmistakable sound of boots on marble echoed through the hall. Federal agents! Nobody move! Chaos exploded. People ran in every direction. Evie's heart slammed against her ribs. She felt Luciano's hand close around her wrist. "Stay with me," he hissed. He pulled her toward a side exit, but agents were already swarming. Flashlights cut through the darkness. Voices barked orders. "Luciano Varcetti! On the ground!" Luciano shoved Evie toward a service corridor. "Go! Now!" "What about you?" "I'll be fine. Go!" Evie ran. She didn't look back. She sprinted down the corridor, her heels clicking against the floor, until she burst through a door into the cold night air. She kept running until her lungs burned and her legs screamed. Finally, she stopped in an alley 3 blocks away, gasping for breath. She pulled out her phone. 12 missed calls, all from Marco. She dialed him back. "Where are you?" Marco barked. "I don't know. An alley, near the docks." "Stay there. I'm coming to get you." "What happened?" "Someone tipped off the feds. They raided the gala looking for Luciano." Evie's blood ran cold. "Did they get him?" "No, but they got your name." "What?" "The tip-off mentioned you specifically. Evie Rowan, listed as an accomplice." Evie's legs gave out. She slumped against the alley wall. "How?" "That's what we're going to find out." Marco's voice was grim. "But whoever did this knows you're working for Luciano, and they're trying to frame you." Marco picked Evie up 20 minutes later. She climbed into the SUV, still shaking, and he handed her a bottle of water without a word. They drove in silence until they reached a safe house on the outskirts of the city, a nondescript building that looked like an old office complex. Inside, Luciano was pacing. His tuxedo jacket was gone, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar. When he saw Evie, something flickered in his eyes. Relief, maybe. "You're okay," he said. "Barely." Evie collapsed into a chair. "They used my name. How did they get my name?" "Because someone inside gave it to them." Luciano stopped pacing and looked at Marco. "Run the list again. Everyone who knew she was working for me." Marco pulled up a tablet. "That's a short list. Me, you, and Seraphine." Evie's head snapped up. "Seraphine knew?" "I had to tell her," Luciano said. "She coordinates all my security for events. She needed to know you'd be there." "Then it's her," Evie said. "It has to be. I saw her tonight, talking to someone about a shipment." Luciano's expression darkened. "Are you sure?" "Positive." Marco frowned. "Seraphine's been with us for 8 years. Why would she turn now?" "I don't know," Evie said. "But she's involved. I'm sure of it." Luciano was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed. "Bring her in." "Who?" Evie asked. "Seraphine. If she's the traitor, I want to hear it from her." An hour later, Seraphine Calder was escorted into the safe house by 2 of Luciano's men. She looked calm, composed, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes when she saw Evie. Recognition and anger. "Luciano," Seraphine said smoothly. "What's this about?" "You tell me." Luciano gestured to a chair. "Sit." Seraphine sat, crossing her legs. "I assume this is about the raid." "It is." "Then you should know I had nothing to do with it." "Really?" Luciano leaned against the desk. "Because someone gave the feds Evie's name, and you're one of 3 people who knew she was working for me." Seraphine's gaze slid to Evie. And you think I'm the leak? I think you've been acting strange, Luciano said. Nervous, distracted. I've been under pressure. We all have. Who were you talking to tonight? On the balcony? Seraphine's jaw tightened. A supplier. It was business. What supplier? Does it matter? It does, if you're lying. Seraphine stood abruptly. I've given you 8 years of loyalty, Luciano, and this is how you repay me, by accusing me of betrayal. Sit down. No. Her voice was cold. I'm done here. She turned to leave, but Marco blocked the door. Seraphine's composure cracked, just for a second. But it was enough. Let me leave, she said quietly. Not until you tell me the truth, Luciano said. Seraphine looked at him, really looked at him. And for the first time, Evie saw something raw in her expression. Pain, rage. You want the truth, Seraphine said. Fine. Your mentor, Dmitry Volkov, the man who taught you everything. Do you remember him? Luciano's face went blank. What about him? You killed him. The room went silent. That was 10 years ago, Luciano said slowly. He betrayed me. He was my father. Evie's breath caught. Luciano didn't move, didn't blink. Your father, he repeated. Yes. Seraphine's voice trembled. And you put a bullet in his head. So yes, Luciano, I'm the traitor. I've been waiting 10 years for this moment. 10 years to destroy everything you built. Marco reached for his gun, but Luciano held up a hand. Don't. He stepped closer to Seraphine. Why wait this long? Because I wanted you to trust me, to depend on me, so when I took everything from you, you'd know it was me. She smiled bitterly. And it worked. The shipments, the feds, all of it. I orchestrated everything. And Evie. Collateral damage. Seraphine glanced at Evie. Nothing personal. You were just convenient. Evie's fists clenched. You tried to ruin my life. I tried to ruin his. Seraphine looked back at Luciano. And I succeeded. Luciano was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. Send them in. Within seconds, the door burst open. Armed men flooded the room, but they weren't Luciano's. Evie realized too late. They were Seraphine's. Did you really think I'd come here alone? Seraphine said, pulling a gun from her purse. Marco lunged, but one of the men tackled him. Luciano moved toward Seraphine, but she aimed the gun at Evie. Don't, Seraphine warned. Luciano froze. Seraphine smiled. Now, we're going to walk out of here, and you're going to let us, or she dies. Evie's heart hammered. She met Luciano's eyes. He looked torn, desperate. Let her go, he said. No, she has nothing to do with this. She has everything to do with this, because you care about her. Seraphine's smile widened. I can see it, the way you look at her. So here's the deal. You let me walk, or I take her with me. Luciano's jaw clenched. Seraphine, decide. Now. Evie didn't think. She just moved. She grabbed the chair beside her and swung it at Seraphine. The gun went off. The bullet grazed Evie's shoulder, but she didn't stop. She tackled Seraphine to the ground, and chaos erupted. Luciano and Marco fought off the armed men. Gunfire echoed, glass shattered. Evie wrestled with Seraphine, pain searing through her shoulder, but adrenaline kept her moving. Finally, Marco knocked Seraphine unconscious with the butt of his gun. Silence fell. Evie collapsed onto the floor, breathing hard. Luciano was at her side in an instant. You're bleeding, he said, his voice rough. I'm fine. You're not fine. He tore a strip from his shirt and pressed it against her shoulder. His hands were shaking. Evie stared at him, and for the first time she saw fear in his eyes. Why did you do that? He asked. Because she was going to kill you. She was going to kill you. I know. Evie smiled weakly. Guess we're even now. Luciano didn't smile back. He just held the cloth against her shoulder and didn't let go. The paramedics arrived 30 minutes later, along with a cleanup crew that moved with practiced efficiency. Evie sat on the edge of an ambulance while a medic stitched her shoulder. Luciano stood nearby, watching. He hadn't left her side since the fight. You should get checked out too, Evie said. I'm fine. You're bleeding. Luciano glanced at his knuckles, split and raw. It's nothing. Stubborn. Look who's talking. Evie smiled despite the pain. The medic finished stitching and wrapped her shoulder in clean bandages. You'll need to keep this dry and come back in a week to get the stitches removed. Thanks. The medic left, and Evie finally looked at Luciano. Really looked at him. His shirt was torn, his face bruised, but his eyes were clear. What happens now? She asked. Seraphine's going to prison. The feds will want to question you. And you. I'll handle it. That's not an answer. Luciano sat down beside her. I don't know, Evie. For the first time in my life, I don't have a plan. That's terrifying coming from you. He laughed quietly. It is, isn't it? They sat in silence for a moment. Then Evie asked the question that had been burning in her mind. Did you really kill her father? Luciano's expression darkened. Yes. Why? Because he was going to kill me first. He looked at his hands. Dimitri trained me, taught me everything I know, but he got greedy, started skimming profits. When I confronted him, he tried to put a bullet in me, so I put one in him. Do you regret it? I regret that it had to happen, but I don't regret surviving. Evie studied him. You've done a lot of terrible things, haven't you? Yes. And you're okay with that? Luciano met her gaze. No, I'm not. The honesty in his voice surprised her. Then why do you keep doing it? Because it's all I know. He paused. Until I met you. Evie's breath caught. Luciano, you asked me why I fired you that night. The truth is, you scared me. You looked at me like I was just a man, not a king, not a monster, just a man. And I didn't know how to handle that. So you destroyed my life? So I tested you. He leaned closer. And you passed. Every single time. Evie didn't know what to say. Her shoulder throbbed, her head spun. But all she could focus on was the way Luciano was looking at her, like she was the only real thing in his world. I don't trust you, she said quietly. I know. I don't even like you. I know that too. But I don't want you to die. Luciano smiled, a real smile. That's a start. Marco appeared, breaking the moment. We need to move. The feds are on their way. Luciano stood, offering Evie his hand. Come on, we're not done yet. Where are we going? Somewhere safe. Evie took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. They climbed into the SUV, and Marco drove them through the city as dawn broke over Redmar Bay. The skyline glowed pink and gold, beautiful and indifferent. They arrived at the Aurelius Tower. Luciano led Evie to the penthouse, and she collapsed onto the couch. Exhaustion hit her like a wave. Rest, Luciano said. I'll handle everything. You keep saying that. Because I mean it. Evie closed her eyes. She didn't remember falling asleep. But when she woke, sunlight was streaming through the windows, and Luciano was sitting across from her, watching. How long was I out? She asked. 6 hours. You didn't sleep? Couldn't. Evie sat up slowly, wincing. What did I miss? The feds came. I gave them Seraphine, told them she was working alone. And they believed you? They didn't have a choice. I had proof, emails, financial records, everything she'd been hiding. Where did you get that? Marco's been digging for weeks. We just didn't know it was her until tonight. Luciano leaned forward. You're off the hook. The charges against you have been dropped. Evie exhaled. Thank God. There's more. Luciano hesitated. I'm shutting it down. Shutting what down? All of it. The smuggling, the black market deals, everything. Evie stared at him. Why? Because I'm tired. His voice was raw. I'm tired of the violence, the lies, the constant looking over my shoulder. I've spent 20 years building an empire. And for what? So people like Seraphine can spend a decade plotting my death? What will you do instead? I don't know yet, but I want to figure it out, and I want you to help me. Me? Yes. Luciano stood and crossed to her. You see the world differently than I do. You see people, not assets, not threats, just people. I need that. I need you. Evie's heart raced. Luciano, I can't. I'm not asking you to fix me. I'm asking you to stay, just for a little while. Help me figure out who I want to be. She wanted to say no, wanted to walk away, but the truth was, she didn't want to leave. Okay, she said finally. I'll stay. Luciano's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you, but I have conditions. Of course you do. No more lies, no more secrets, and if I stay, I'm not your employee. I'm your partner, equal say in everything. Luciano extended his hand. Deal. Evie shook it, and this time it felt different, like the beginning of something real. Over the next 2 weeks, Evie watched Luciano dismantle his empire piece by piece. He sold off properties, closed accounts, severed ties with associates who'd been with him for years. Some went quietly, others didn't. But Luciano was relentless. Evie helped where she could. She reviewed contracts, flagged suspicious dealings, and asked questions no one else dared to ask. And slowly, she began to see a different side of Luciano. Not the cold crime lord, but a man trying to escape his own shadow. One evening, they sat on the penthouse balcony, watching the city lights flicker to life below. Luciano had been quiet all day, tension radiating from him. What's wrong? Evie asked. I met with my accountant today, finalized the last transfer. And it's done. Everything legitimate now, clean. He took a sip of whiskey. I should feel relieved. But you don't. No, I feel empty. Evie leaned against the railing. That's because you built your identity around this life. Now that it's gone, you don't know who you are. Luciano looked at her. And who am I? I don't know, but you get to decide now. That's the gift. Some gift. It is. Evie turned to face him. Most people never get to reinvent themselves. They're stuck being who they've always been. You have a chance to be someone new. Luciano set his glass down. And what if I don't like who I become? Then you try again. That's what second chances are for. He studied her for a long moment. When did you get so wise? When I realized I was talking to someone who actually wanted to change. She smiled. Most people just want permission to stay the same. Luciano moved closer. You really believe I can do this? I do. Why? Because you're still here. Because you didn't run when it got hard. Because you're trying. She paused. And because I see something in you that you don't see in yourself. What's that? Hope. Luciano's expression softened. He reached up and brushed a strand of hair from her face. The gesture was so gentle, so unexpected that Evie's breath caught. "I don't deserve you," he said quietly. "Probably not." He smiled. "But I'm not letting you go." "Good, because I wasn't planning on leaving." They stood there, inches apart, the city humming below them. And then Luciano kissed her. Soft at first, hesitant, like he was afraid she'd pull away. But Evie didn't. She kissed him back, and something inside her cracked open. When they finally broke apart, Luciano rested his forehead against hers. "I'm scared, Evie." "Of what?" "Of ruining this, of being who I was and destroying the only good thing I have." "You won't." "How do you know?" "Because I won't let you." Luciano laughed softly. "You're terrifying, you know that?" "I've been told." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Evie let herself fall into it. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about survival. She was thinking about living. The next morning, Evie woke to find Luciano already dressed, pacing the living room with his phone pressed to his ear. He looked agitated. "I understand. Yes, I'll handle it." He hung up and turned to Evie. "We have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "One of my former associates, Victor Crane. He's not happy about me going legitimate." "Why?" "Because I know too much, and he thinks I'll talk." Evie's stomach tightened. "Will you?" "No, but he doesn't believe me." Luciano ran a hand through his hair. "He's planning to make an example of me." "What does that mean?" "It means we need to leave. Today." "Where?" "I have a safe house upstate, remote, off the grid. We can lay low there until this blows over." Evie stood. "How long?" "I don't know. A few weeks, maybe a month." "And then?" "Then we figure out the rest." They left within the hour. Marco drove them north through winding mountain roads until they reached a cabin nestled deep in the woods. It was small, rustic, nothing like the Aurelius Tower, but it was safe. Marco stayed for the first night, sweeping the perimeter and setting up security. Then he left, promising to check in every few days. Evie and Luciano were alone. The first few days were strange. They cooked together, talked, argued about stupid things like how to make coffee. But slowly, they settled into a rhythm. And Evie realized something. This felt like home. One night, they sat by the fireplace, wrapped in blankets. Snow had started to fall outside, covering the world in white. "I've been thinking," Luciano said. "About?" "What I want to do, when this is over." "And?" "I want to build something. Not an empire. Something that actually helps people." "Like what?" "Security consulting. Legitimate. For businesses, high-profile individuals. I know how criminals think. I can protect people from them." Evie smiled. "That's perfect." "You think so?" "I do. It uses your skills, but for good." Luciano looked at her. "And what about you? What do you want?" Evie thought about it. "I want to help people who don't have a voice. Kids in foster care, people trapped in bad situations. I want to build something that gives them options." "A foundation?" "Maybe. I don't know yet, but something real." Luciano reached for her hand. "Then let's do it. Together." "You mean it?" "I do." Evie squeezed his hand. "Okay, partners." Partners. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire crackle. And for the first time in her life, Evie felt like she belonged somewhere. 3 weeks later, Marco called. "Victor's been arrested. FBI got him on racketeering charges. You're clear." Luciano exhaled. "You're sure?" "Positive. It's over." "Thanks, Marco." "Anytime, boss." Luciano hung up and turned to Evie. "We can go home." "Home," Evie repeated. "Where's that?" "Wherever you are." She smiled. That was cheesy. I know, but I meant it. They packed up the cabin and drove back to Redmar Bay. But instead of returning to the Aurelius Tower, Luciano took them to a smaller building. Modern, clean, with an office space on the first floor and an apartment above. "What's this?" Evie asked. "Our new headquarters, for the security firm and the foundation." Evie stared at him. "You bought this?" "Last week, while we were hiding." He handed her a key. "It's ours, both of us." Evie took the key, her throat tight. "Luciano, I'm serious about this, Evie. About us. About building something real." He stepped closer. "I know I've made mistakes. I know I've hurt people. But I want to be better, and I want to do it with you." Evie looked up at him. "You're really doing this?" "I am." "And you're not going to change your mind?" "Not a chance." She kissed him, long and deep. When they pulled apart, she whispered, "Then let's get to work." The next 6 months were a blur. Luciano launched his security consulting firm, leveraging his old contacts in ways that were legal but effective. Companies paid top dollar for his expertise. He knew how criminals operated because he'd been one. And now he used that knowledge to protect instead of exploit. Evie threw herself into building the foundation. She called it Second Chances, a name that felt right. It provided resources for kids aging out of foster care, job training, housing assistance, mentorship programs, everything Evie wished she'd had growing up. They worked 16-hour days, fought over budgets, celebrated small victories. And somewhere along the way, they stopped being two damaged people trying to survive. They became partners in every sense of the word. One evening, Evie was reviewing grant applications when Luciano appeared with 2 glasses of wine. "You need a break," he said. "I'm fine." "You've been staring at that screen for 4 hours. Evie rubbed her eyes. "There's so much to do. And it'll still be there tomorrow." He set the wine down. "Come on, let's go upstairs." They climbed to the apartment above the office. It was small but comfortable. Evie collapsed on the couch and Luciano sat beside her. "I got a call today," he said. "From who?" "A reporter. She wants to interview me about the transition from crime to legitimate business." Evie sat up. "Are you going to do it?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to show people that change is possible, but another part thinks it's too risky." "What does your gut say?" Luciano thought about it. "My gut says yes, but I want your opinion." "I think you should do it, not for publicity, but because your story might help someone else who's trying to escape that life." Luciano nodded slowly. "You're right. I usually am." He smiled. "Cocky. Confident." They sat in comfortable silence, sipping wine. Then Luciano said, "I have something to show you." "What?" He pulled out his phone and opened an email. "Look at this." Evie leaned in. It was from a non-profit organization. They wanted to partner with Second Chances, provide funding, national reach. "This is huge," Evie breathed. "It is, but there's a catch." "What?" "They want you to lead it, full-time. It would mean stepping back from the day-to-day operations here." Evie's heart raced. "I don't know if I'm ready for that." "You are. You've built something incredible, and they see it." "But what about us? What about the business here?" "I'll handle it, and you'll still be involved, just from a bigger platform." Evie looked at the email again. It was everything she'd dreamed of, but it was terrifying. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Of course. Take all the time you need." But Evie already knew her answer. She just needed to say it out loud. The next day, she called the organization and accepted. Luciano threw her a small celebration, just the two of them and Marco, who'd become more friend than employee over the months. "Speech," Marco said, raising his glass. Evie laughed. "I'm terrible at speeches." "Try anyway." She stood, suddenly nervous. "Okay. A year ago, I was a waitress drowning in debt. I thought my life was over. But then I met someone who changed everything." She looked at Luciano. "He fired me, ruined my life, and then gave me a second chance. And I'm grateful, because I wouldn't be here without him." Luciano stood and crossed to her. "And I wouldn't be here without you." Marco cleared his throat. "Okay, you two are making me uncomfortable. I'm leaving." They laughed. Marco left, and Evie and Luciano were alone again. "I'm proud of you," Luciano said. "I'm proud of us." "Us?" He repeated the word like it was sacred. "I like the sound of that." "Me too." They kissed, slow and sweet, and Evie thought about how far they'd come. From enemies to partners, from broken to whole. Weeks passed. Evie travelled for work, meeting with donors and visiting program sites. Luciano expanded the security firm, hiring a team of specialists. They talked every night, no matter where they were. But Evie missed him. Missed the quiet mornings, the late-night conversations, the feeling of falling asleep next to someone who understood her. One night, she was in Chicago for a conference when her phone rang. It was Luciano. "Hey," she said, smiling. "I was just thinking about you. Good thoughts, I hope. Always. I need to tell you something." His tone made Evie's stomach drop. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, but I need you to come home." "Why? What happened?" "Just trust me. Can you catch the next flight?" "Luciano, please, Evie, it's important." She heard the urgency in his voice. "Okay, I'll be there tomorrow." "Thank you." He hung up, and Evie stared at her phone. Her mind raced with possibilities. Was someone after him? Had something happened with the business? She barely slept that night. The next morning, she caught the earliest flight back to Redmar Bay. She went straight to the office, but Luciano wasn't there. Marco met her at the door. "Where is he?" Evie asked. "Upstairs." "Is he okay?" Marco smiled. "Just go." Evie climbed the stairs, her heart pounding. She pushed open the apartment door and froze. The room was filled with candles, hundreds of them, and in the center stood Luciano, dressed in a suit, looking nervous. "What is this?" Evie whispered. Luciano crossed to her. "I've been thinking about what you said, about second chances, about building something real." He took her hands. "And I realized something. You're not just my partner, you're my everything." Evie's eyes filled with tears. "Luciano." He dropped to one knee. "Evie Rowan, you walked into my life when I least expected it. You challenged me, changed me, made me believe I could be more than the man I was." He pulled out a ring. Simple, elegant, perfect. "I don't have all the answers. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want to face it with you. Will you marry me?" Evie couldn't speak. She just nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she finally managed. "Yes." Luciano slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms. They kissed, and Evie felt like she was floating. "I love you," Luciano whispered. "I love you too." They held each other, surrounded by candlelight, and Evie thought about the journey that had brought them here. The pain, the fear, the hope. It had all been worth it. They set a date, 6 months. Enough time to plan, but not so long that they'd overthink it. Evie wanted something small, intimate, just close friends and family. Luciano agreed, though he insisted on one thing. I want it at the Aurelius Tower, he said, on the balcony at sunset. Why? Because that's where I first realized I was falling for you, standing there, watching you refuse to be intimidated by my world. Evie smiled. Okay, the Aurelius Tower it is. Planning the wedding was surprisingly easy. They kept it simple. White flowers, string lights, a small group of people who actually mattered. Marco was Luciano's best man. Evie asked her former co-worker from the Meridian House, a woman named Jenna who'd stayed in touch. But as the date approached, Evie felt a knot forming in her stomach. Not because she was having doubts, but because something felt unfinished. One night, she brought it up. I need to do something before the wedding. Luciano looked up from his laptop. What? I need to visit my past. What do you mean? Evie took a deep breath. I need to go back to the group home where I grew up. I need to talk to the kids there. Tell them that it gets better. Luciano closed his laptop. You want me to come with you? Would you? Of course. The next weekend, they drove to the outskirts of Redmar Bay, to a squat brick building that looked exactly as Evie remembered. Grey, cold, institutional. She stood outside for a long moment, memories flooding back. Luciano took her hand. You don't have to do this. I do. They walked inside. A woman in her 50s greeted them. Her name was Mrs. Patterson, and she'd been the director when Evie lived there. Evie Rowan, Mrs. Patterson said, surprised. I heard you were doing well. I am. Evie introduced Luciano. This is my fiancé. Mrs. Patterson's eyes widened. Congratulations. What brings you back? I want to talk to the kids, if that's okay. Of course. They'd love to meet you. Mrs. Patterson led them to a common room where a dozen teenagers sat watching TV or doing homework. They looked up when Evie entered, curious but guarded. Everyone, Mrs. Patterson said. This is Evie. She grew up here, and she wanted to come back and talk to you. Evie stepped forward, suddenly nervous. Hi, I know you don't know me, but I was where you are. I aged out of the system, struggled, worked 2 jobs just to survive. She paused. But I also learned something. Your past doesn't define your future. You do. One girl, maybe 16, raised her hand. How did you make it? By refusing to give up, and by accepting help when it was offered. Evie glanced at Luciano. I met people who believed in me, and I started believing in myself. Another kid asked, What do you do now? I run a foundation. It helps kids like you, provides resources, support, opportunities. Evie pulled out business cards. If any of you need help, or just someone to talk to, call me. She handed out the cards. Some kids took them eagerly, others were skeptical. But Evie didn't care. She'd planted a seed, and that was enough. As they left, Mrs. Patterson pulled Evie aside. Thank you for coming back. A lot of kids don't. I almost didn't, Evie admitted, but I realized I needed to, for them, and for me. Mrs. Patterson smiled. You turned out well, Evie. I'm proud of you. Those words hit harder than Evie expected. She hugged Mrs. Patterson, tears stinging her eyes. Then she and Luciano walked back to the car. You okay? Luciano asked. Yeah, I just needed closure. Did you get it? I think so. Luciano kissed her forehead. You're amazing, you know that? I'm just trying to be better than I was yesterday. Then you're succeeding. The weeks leading up to the wedding flew by. Evie finalized details. Luciano handled logistics. And slowly, excitement replaced anxiety. The night before the wedding, Evie stayed at Jenna's apartment. Tradition, Jenna insisted. Luciano texted her constantly. I miss you. It's been 6 hours. 6 hours too long. Evie smiled. Go to sleep. I'll see you tomorrow. Can't sleep. Too nervous. About what? That you'll realize you can do better and run. Not a chance. You're stuck with me. Good. Evie set her phone down and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow she'd marry Luciano Varcetti, the man who'd fired her, blacklisted her, nearly gotten her killed, and somehow, through all of it, became the person she couldn't imagine living without. Life was strange like that. The next day dawned clear and bright. Evie woke early, nerves buzzing. Jenna helped her get ready. The dress was simple, elegant, nothing extravagant, just like Evie wanted. You look beautiful, Jenna said. I look nervous. That too. They drove to the Aurelius Tower. Marco met them at the elevator, looking sharp in a suit. He's a wreck up there, Marco said, grinning. Good, Evie said. Means he cares. Marco laughed. Oh, he cares. I've never seen him like this. The elevator rose. Evie's heart pounded. When the doors opened, she stepped onto the balcony and forgot how to breathe. The space was transformed. White flowers everywhere, string lights casting a warm glow. And at the end of the aisle stood Luciano, looking at her like she was the only person in the world. The ceremony was short, simple. The officiant spoke about love and second chances, about two people who'd found each other in the most unexpected way. When it was time for vows, Luciano went first. Evie, a year ago I didn't believe in redemption. I thought I was too far gone, too broken, but then you walked into my life and refused to let me hide. His voice cracked. You saw me, the real me, and you didn't run. You stayed, you fought, you loved me when I didn't deserve it, and I promised to spend the rest of my life being worthy of that love. Evie wiped her eyes. Then it was her turn. Luciano, you terrified me. You infuriated me. You made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. She smiled through tears. But you also made me braver, stronger. You showed me that people can change, that hope isn't stupid, it's survival, and I promise to remind you of that every single day. The officiant smiled. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss. Luciano pulled Evie close and kissed her, deep and slow. The small crowd erupted in applause, but Evie barely heard it. All she heard was her heartbeat, and Luciano's whispered words, I love you. I love you too. The reception was perfect, small, intimate, exactly what they wanted. They danced under the stars, ate good food, laughed with friends, and for a few hours, the world felt right. Later, when the guests had left and it was just the two of them, Evie and Luciano stood on the balcony, looking out at Redmar Bay. We did it, Evie said. We did. What now? Luciano pulled her close. Now we live. Just like that. Just like that. Evie rested her head on his shoulder. I'm scared. Of what? That something will happen, that I'll wake up and this will all be a dream. It's not a dream. This is real. We're real. Promise? I promise. They stood there, wrapped in each other, as the city lights flickered below. And Evie thought about the journey that had brought them here, from a hostile restaurant, to a dangerous gala, to a penthouse filled with candles. Every step had led to this moment, and she wouldn't change a single thing. Luciano? Yeah? Thank you. For what? For firing me. He laughed. That's a weird thing to thank me for. Maybe. But if you hadn't, we wouldn't be here. Luciano kissed the top of her head. Then it was the best decision I ever made. They stayed on the balcony until dawn, talking about everything and nothing. About the foundation, the security firm, the future they'd build together. And when the sun finally rose, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Evie felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. 6 months later, Second Chances had expanded to 5 cities. Luciano's security firm had contracts with major corporations. They'd bought a house, small but comfortable, with a yard and a dog named Dante that Luciano pretended to hate but secretly adored. Life wasn't perfect. They still fought, still struggled, but they faced it together, and that made all the difference. One evening, Evie came home to find Luciano in the kitchen, attempting to cook dinner. Smoke billowed from the oven. "What are you doing?" she asked, laughing. "Making lasagna. How's that going?" "Terribly." Evie crossed to him and kissed his cheek. "Move over. Let me help." They cooked together, bumping elbows and stealing bites of cheese. And when they finally sat down to eat, the lasagna was burned on the edges, but tasted perfect. "This is nice," Luciano said. "It is. I mean it. This. Us. The boring domestic stuff. I never thought I'd have this." "Neither did I." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm glad we did." "Me too." Later that night, they curled up on the couch watching a terrible movie. Dante snored at their feet, and Evie thought about how far they'd come. From enemies to lovers, from broken to whole, from surviving to thriving. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. "Luciano," Evie said softly. Do you ever miss it? Your old life?" He thought about it for a long moment. "Sometimes. The power, the control. But then I look at what I have now, and I realize I didn't lose anything. I gained everything." "That's a good answer. It's the truth." Evie snuggled closer. "I love you." "I love you too." They sat in comfortable silence, the TV flickering in the background, and Evie realized something. This was happiness, not the big dramatic moments, but the quiet ones, the ordinary ones, the ones where you felt safe and loved and home. And she wouldn't trade it for anything. Years passed. Second Chances grew into a national organization. Luciano's firm became one of the most respected in the industry. They traveled, worked hard, built a life that mattered. And through it all, they stayed true to each other, to the promise they'd made on that balcony, to love, to hope, to second chances. One evening, 10 years after they'd met, Evie stood on the balcony of the Aurelius Tower. Luciano came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How different life could have been if I hadn't walked into that restaurant, if you hadn't fired me." "Regrets?" "Not a single one." Luciano kissed her neck. "Good, because I'd do it all over again. Even the dangerous parts. Especially the dangerous parts. They led me to you." Evie turned in his arms. "You know what the best part is?" "What?" "We get to keep doing this, building, growing, living. Forever, forever." They kissed as the sun set over Redmar Bay, casting the city in gold. And in that moment, everything felt right. Not perfect, but right. Because they'd learned something along the way. Life wasn't about perfection. It was about choice. About deciding every single day to be better, to love harder, to fight for what mattered. And they'd keep choosing each other, every day, for the rest of their lives. Evie pulled back and smiled. "We did good. We did." "What's next?" Luciano grinned. "Whatever we want." And that was the beauty of it. They'd taken their broken pieces and built something whole, something real, something that would last. Two people who'd started as enemies, who'd fought and struggled and nearly destroyed each other. But in the end, they'd saved each other instead. Because that's what love does. It transforms. It heals. It gives you a second chance. And Evie and Luciano had taken that chance and run with it, building a life, a legacy, a future, together. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the stars emerge one by one, Evie knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. If you enjoyed this story of redemption, transformation, and second chances, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more captivating tales. Drop a comment below and tell us what you thought about Evie and Luciano's journey from enemies to soulmates. What would you do if you were in Evie's shoes? Would you have taken Luciano's offer? Let's discuss in the comments. And remember, everyone deserves a second chance. Sometimes the person who challenges you the most becomes the one you can't live without. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.